program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good evening, and thanks for showing up on a Thursday. For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Adam Key. I'm an associate professor of communication here, and then I'm the organizer for TEDx KSU Salina. This event has been kind of a roller coaster to put together. It has been over a year since we pitched this, and we've gone through speaker changes, venue changes, date changes, name changes. It's been a lot. The speakers you'll see tonight are experts from all over Kansas, and in some cases all over the country, who have been working on these talks for the better part of a year, and the expertise for the better part of their lifetimes. I really want to take a moment to thank some people getting started here. First of all, to the remarkable team of staff who've helped this along the way. Heather, Sarah, Kathy, Lisa, Mo, all of the Annie, all these people who've put this together and just really taken as much off my plate as they can, because these are kind of stressful things to put together. To the wonderful digital media students that you see around all dressed in black filming this, I very much appreciate the efforts. To the speakers who are cooling off, it was kind of hot backstage, so we moved them a little bit, but how much work they put in. And to each and every one of you, thank you for being here tonight. And finally, to my department chair, Troy Harding, and as well as Dean Alicia Starkey, thank you for believing in a first-year faculty member here and this crazy idea that they wanted to pull off. So thank you so much for all of that. And with that, we will get started. You know, I got to choose my words carefully because our first speaker is an attorney, but she is much more than that. She is a person of a really interesting background with also a really interesting and diverse perspective, who'll be talking to us tonight about how to make diversity work, because diversity has become kind of a hot buzzword these days. But it will be a reminder of how important it is to make it work and to make everyone feel included. Please welcome Amber Thompson.
People say it can't work, black and white. However, before you turn to hate, you should always, always remember the Titans. I feel like my 7th grade substitute teacher rolling out the TV in the middle of the room right now. But yes, I want to talk to you about Remember the Titans. Remember the Titans, if you'll recall, is a movie starring Denzel Washington where he's the coach of a championship football team that's comprised of black and white football players during the civil rights era. However, not only are they a championship football team, but they grow to love each other and care about each other. Now, I want you to bear with me here and think about if that plot had been slightly different. I want you to think about if the black football players had demanded that they play offense and the white football players had demanded that they play defense. And this wasn't because of some Jim Crow era policy. Instead, it was because the football players opted for that. Now, I have a feeling my substitute teachers wouldn't have been showing that movie so often. I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that's become a bit of a double-edged sword. I'm here to talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. And as I stand here today, I want to let you in on a little secret. I am a DEI hire. And what I mean by that is that if the individuals before me had not advocated for diversity, equity, and inclusion as a business imperative, I would not have had the opportunity to get my education at the University of Alabama School of Law. I would not work at the law firm that I do today, and I would not be standing before you on this stage. However, now the term DEI hire has become a slur. It's become something meant to pity someone who's gotten a promotion solely because of their demographics as opposed to their talent or qualifications. And why is that happening? It's happening because we have focused on DEI. We've done a good job with respect to the D. We've ensured that there's more Black and brown faces coming into the workplace. We've had improvement with respect to E. Individuals of lower socioeconomic classes have more social mobility than ever before. However, I, inclusion, that's where we're struggling. And we're struggling with respect to inclusion because we've opted for intentional separation as opposed to unity. In short, we haven't done enough to bring the straight white man and the lesbian Black woman together. We've focused too much on bonding social capital as opposed to bridging social capital. And I'd like to break down those terms here a little bit for you. Bonding social capital, as Robert Putnam says, is social capital that's based on one's demographic. So I want you to think of joining a group based on your race or your gender. And in contrast, bridging social capital involves joining a group based on a shared interest, but not having the same demographics. And so I want you to think about joining a running club or a book club. A lot of the time when businesses have opted for diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, they have jumped to policies involving bonding social capital groups. Ensure that individuals from minorities are brought together and can talk to people about their shared experiences. And before I get more into this, I want to be clear. I am an advocate of bonding social capital groups. Whenever I moved to Alabama for law school, I'd never left my hometown. And the Black Law Students Association was my first community in Alabama and the organization where I met the law firm that I work at today. In a similar vein, I work at a law firm by the name of Lightfoot, Franklin, and White. We have a group called WOLF, Women of Lightfoot, Franklin. And it's one of the primary reasons that I wanted to work at the firm. However, I want to talk about some of the unintended consequences of bonding social capital. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when he had a dream, he didn't think of Black kids sitting on one side of the classroom and white kids sitting on the other side of the classroom. Instead, he envisioned bridging social capital. He envisioned Black and white kids working together, learning together, loving each other. And with bonding social capital groups, there's the danger of the majority not getting to know minorities. While minorities are doing a great job of getting to know each other and feeling connected with each other, they're left not feeling connected to the greater workplace. And as a result, this leads to resentment. Of course, it's going to seem like someone was only promoted due to their race or gender when you haven't had the opportunity to get to know them, and they've spent their social time at the workplace only with minorities as opposed to everyone at large. Further, I want to talk about the danger this poses for minorities. First, it poses the danger of feeling isolated from one's workplace. And a lot of the time we see problems with retention because individuals may find friends within the minority group, but they don't feel connected to the larger workplace. So they're going to keep their friends in the bonding social capital group and then move on elsewhere. There's also the danger of minorities not feeling connected with the bonding social capital groups that they're shepherded into. For example, these groups may serve as echo chambers of tribalism that push views that are different than that individual's lifestyle. And so, for example, if someone's in a Black support group, it may be that the group overwhelmingly believes that one should marry someone of the Black race as opposed to interracial marriage. With respect to women's support groups, it may be that the individuals in that group push for women not changing their last name at marriage or choosing to not have children. With respect to LGBTQ support groups, an individual that's a bisexual may feel pressured to date someone of the same sex so they fit into the group. And so this can lead to minorities feeling isolated, not just in the greater workplace, but also within the bonding social capital group, feeling isolated as a whole. And so how do we fix the issues that I've discussed today? Well, first, we need to make an intentional decision to bridge social capital. Go join that running club. Go join that book club. And also, if you're someone at your workplace that has a hand in putting together work events, then you need to ensure that people that are different from one another are coming together and forming connections. We also need to think about combining bonding and bridging social capital together. For example, married couples and single people are examples of bonding and bridging capital coming together. With respect to bonding social capital groups, it's important that these groups continue to remain in our workplaces, but also that we ensure the individual is valued more than a collective opinion of the group. That way, all individuals in the bonding social capital group can feel welcome and heard. In closing, I want you to think about what makes the Titans special. Why do we remember the Titans? And it's not because they're a great football team, even though they were. And it's not because the football team was comprised of black and white football players, even though that was the case too. It's because they embody diversity, equity, and inclusion. They show what happens when a diverse group works together to create the best product and result possible. It shows what happens when people look at the individual as opposed to demographics and choose to show a hand. Thank you.
That was a very nice and strong way to start this out. Also, forgive me when the nerves and trying to do everything. I forgot something in my first set of thank yous. Oh. I love randomly calling my boss out of the audience. It's always fun. Where'd he go? Troy, could you come up for a quick second? We're only being live streamed to hundreds of thousands of potential people. And thanks for your support. I'd like to present you with this extremely limited edition poster, which is signed by all the speakers.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your help. All right. For those of you who are students or faculty here, this next speaker is a kind of familiar face, and hey, he's actually on campus for this. So, heard he flew in. Man, are his arms tired. Thank you for the three of you who thought that was funny. However, he flew in on a plane I'm imagining he piloted, but we'll be talking here shortly about the future, and maybe the plane will be the pilot itself. Please welcome Kurt Barnhart.
How many of you remember the cartoon The Jetsons? The Jetsons was the first cartoon I know of to combine the future concepts for what life would be like 100 years from now with the average family. I mean, they had video conferencing, they had automated transportation, they had house cleaning robots. It's amazing. I mean, they had it all. Well, we're not quite there, but we're gaining on some of those ideas because while we know that art imitates life, life often imitates art eventually. My name is Dr. Kurt Barnhart, and I'm a professor with Kansas State University's Aerospace and Technology campus, and I'm here today to talk about the amazing technological revolution that's now emerging in an industry that affects nearly all of us at one point or another, air transportation. My topic today is really intended for the general public, not necessarily those in our industry, because most of those already know what I'm about to tell you. I've spent my entire career, almost 40 years now, in the field of civil aviation, from being a pilot, an aircraft maintenance technician, a researcher, and an academic, and I'm here to speak to you today because I'm more excited today about the future of the air transportation industry than I've ever been. While negative headlines can often co-opt our attention, if you haven't been paying close attention, I'm here to report that we're now crossing a threshold of a technological revolution that is truly extraordinary. This revolution is enabled by advancements across many industry sectors. Aerospace is a highly visible industry, but as an industry, it emerges from a fusion of myriad supporting technologies that are rapidly advancing independently, but collectively, they're driving this change in the industry that I'm most passionate about. Speaking broadly, I'm talking about advancements in materials, propulsion, digital capabilities, machine learning, and automation of all kinds. Advancements are not just limited to technology, however. I'm also excited about the advancements in the regulatory perspective. It show our ability to think very creatively about how we're going to use our national airspace system and encourage innovation. In case you haven't noticed, very revolutionary technology is on the verge of entering the aviation market, and in some cases it already has. Over the next few years, these aircraft will be more and more prevalent, and these vehicles will allow us to transport people more efficiently, more safely, and more sustainably than ever before. Most of these vehicles will present with many of the following characteristics. Number one, they'll be capable of carrying passengers in both vertical and horizontal flight at speeds greater than that of a traditional helicopter. They're going to look very differently. They're also going to be powered by alternate forms of energy. Current solutions focus heavily on electric power, but in the future, we'll likely see other power sources including nuclear, hydrogen, and others not yet known. They're going to be capable of both human, but ultimately autonomous and intelligent flight. So are you skeptical about autonomous flight in aviation? Well, don't be, because we have a rigorous certification process in aviation that most industries do not have. And this technology will only be permitted to carry passengers when the safety has been demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt. Safety will increase, not decrease. Even now, an increasing number of smaller aircraft have a button that in any phase of flight, a passenger can press that button and it will perform an auto landing at any point throughout that flight. Farther into the future, we're going to be looking at aircraft that have self-healing structures, aircraft that can diagnose mechanical trouble and in some cases fix themselves, at least temporarily, aircraft that have adaptive flight controls, which is technology that will automatically configure the aircraft for optimum flyaway potential from any trouble while the situation is diagnosed and remedied. We'll be seeing aircraft that have no onboard operator. When you consider the current workforce shortage in aviation, this becomes viable, if not a necessity at some point. Please know, however, that these advancements will only occur in an air traffic system that is much more advanced than what we have now. Recently, I was wondering about the public opinion and the public acceptance of flying in an automated aircraft, so I undertook an informal online survey and asked respondents to indicate their likelihood of ever flying in a fully automated aircraft. And the results were interesting. 70 respondents. So here's the question. I quote, "The question relates to traveling by air at some time in the future as a paying passenger traveling on a federally approved and certified mode of publicly accessible air transportation. How likely are you to travel on board an aircraft that is fully automated from the time you board the aircraft to the time you exit the aircraft?" And the results are fairly interesting. They were actually weighted more towards the older population. There were 30% that said, no way, never, but 70% agreed at some point, at some level, that they would actually do that. Some people said, I want somebody at least on the aircraft who's capable of intervening. Others said, as long as there's somebody who can intervene from the ground, that's fine. And then others said, as long as it's federally certified, I'm fine. And remember, these are biased towards the older segment, so that data is going to change. I think it's promising. It will only improve over time, regardless of where you fall with respect to new technologies and many of the hot button issues surrounding that today. Most all of us can agree that all else being equal, more efficient is better, safer is better, as is more personalized transportation service closer to your origins and destinations. The advancements we're talking about potential to bring all of that and more, and I'm not even mentioning what's going on outside of our atmosphere, which is even more exciting. Now, to be candid, the pushback I often hear when I talk about what's going on in this industry with those who are not involved with these changes, more often than not, has a base of fear and general skepticism, if not outright anger. And some of that's understandable and frankly expected. With this, we're challenging current norms, and that can be painful at times because it involves change, and change can involve loss. Often, some of these technologies get caught in the political crossfire, but my plea is that the hearer considers the potential of these new technologies on their own without reacting to a larger narrative. Give it time. What is destined to succeed will succeed. Here's a few questions to think about as you ponder what I'm talking about. Are there significant challenges on this journey, and will there be in the future? Yes, absolutely. Will there be setbacks and losses, accidents and fatalities on this journey? Yes, but few, and they will gradually lessen over time. Can alternate sources of energy deliver performance equal to fossil fuels right now? No, they can't. Does alternate energy in its current form have sustainability problems of its own? Yes, it does. In 1900, could the automobile provide the same service as a horse could? No. Were there those in the early 1900s that thought the automobile was a passing fad? Yes, there were. Could the microprocessor do in the early 1960s what the slide rule could? So what was the driving force behind why all these technologies are everywhere today? And that's innovation. Can we build enough batteries to power the transition with current technology? Not likely. Will all of these innovations and advancements we're talking about here succeed? No, they won't. When you form your opinion about the future of any technology, it's important to refrain from only considering the current form. Advancements in science and technology are happening even now and will continue that will make many of these objections obsolete. We innovate. It's in our blood. So in closing, let's let the technology prove or disprove itself. Some will, some won't. Well, we're not yet in 2062 when the Jetsons were set. We're getting there, and it's exciting. And I want to thank you for spending these few minutes with me. And I want to say that if you're not excited about what I'm talking about, my hope is that you soon will be. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I look forward to one day being like, Alexa, fly me to Hawaii. Because you know Amazon's going to have that. All right. So from self-flying planes, which are a great innovation for the future, at present, we still have a great need of pilots. One of the reasons this great university campus exists. And one of those things those pilots do is try to find people in disasters. In fact, one of the things I came to learn in putting this program together was about the civilian air patrol, something that I've lived all over and never knew existed, and now I'm very, very grateful for. And I'm also extremely grateful to have the head of that here today to talk about the importance of what they do and the importance of volunteering. So please welcome Regina A.
Well, hello, friends. Let's get to know each other just a little bit with an old icebreaker that's very classic. One of the things on this slide is a lie. I am the CEO of a $250 million corporation. I oversee an aircraft fleet that would be the 8th largest airline if we looked at fleet size. I oversee an aircraft fleet that would be the 13th largest Air Force by fleet size. I lead more than 69,000 people. I pay $35 a year to serve as the volunteer CEO and commander. If you chose the first bullet as the lie, you would be correct. Everything else on this slide is accurate. I am the volunteer CEO and national commander for Civil Air Patrol, the United States Air Force Auxiliary. We are 69,000 volunteers plus, and we are volunteers serving our communities, saving lives, and shaping futures. We do that through 3 missions: aerospace education, emergency services, and the cadet program, utilizing a fleet of more than 540 Cessna aircraft. Each year, we impact approximately 500,000 youth with our aerospace education and STEM products. For all of those things, I pay $35 a year. Some of you are looking very confused, and you're saying to yourself, did she say she volunteers with all of her spare time? Indeed, I do. How can that be? Volunteerism is down in most states and has been in decline for years. Why would she do that? Did she say she's a volunteer CEO and commander? Is that even a real thing? I assure you it is. I competed for this position with other volunteers who also wanted to hold it. Did she say that she pays to volunteer? What's with that? Did she get chosen last for dodgeball also in PE class? It's true. I was chosen last for every sport in gym class, and I do pay in many ways to be a volunteer. I pay my $35 a year dues. I donate to our foundation, as all good corporate leaders do, for causes that are strong, that they believe in, and I pay in opportunity costs. I could be seeking a college presidency or vice presidency, and that would send me a very large traditional paycheck. Instead, I choose to volunteer. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight, why I choose to volunteer. So the picture of me on the left is me with my first aircraft, only one in the fleet at that time. But apparently I had an interest in aviation from a very young age. And I put a lot of hours on that airframe because apparently it was one of my favorite toys. As a child, I thought I wanted to fly, and I wanted to join the military to serve my country. Unfortunately, the tumor that doctors took out of the left side of my head when I was 9 months old meant that that dream would never take flight. So I grew up the shy kid that you see in the second picture in a small town in rural Kansas. I didn't know much about what happened beyond the borders of the town I grew up in. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I didn't find my niche and where I fit in. I had challenges like all young people. When I was 17 years old, something transformational happened in my life, and it's related to what Muhammad Ali would tell us about service. He would tell us that service is the rent you pay for your time here on earth. So at 17, I started to pay my rent. The health issues that I had been battling, tremors, double vision, and migraines, disappeared, and my parents allowed me to volunteer and be the cadet that you see in the third picture. That shy kid in picture number 2 would have been absolutely terrified to speak in front of a group. But as you can see in the third picture, I built some confidence. I found my niche and I found my passion. And that's why I am hooked on volunteering. And that's where my leadership journey began. And that journey has given me tremendous skills. And that's why I pay to volunteer. And that's what led me to be the leader that you see on the right. Now I interact with members of Congress, individuals at the Pentagon, general officers, and on occasion, I even speak with the Secretary of the Air Force. I'm a CEO of a corporation. I'm confident, and I'm not afraid of speaking. So it's not all about me, though. I'm a servant leader. So let me tell you a little bit about what I get to do. People will tell you that our future in this country is not very bright. Young people are not like they used to be, and we have no idea what they're going to do with the world. If you were privileged to work with the young people that I get to work with through volunteering, you would know that our future is not only bright, but you would be excited about what it looks like. Let me introduce you to one of the people I get to work with. This young cadet just finished our program. That's a feat that only 0.5% of young people are able to do. It requires testing in leadership and aerospace education. And for the students in the room, those are closed book tests that require an 80% to pass. It also requires passing the fitness test that cadets take at the Air Force Academy. It requires being a leader of character, and it requires a lot of dedication in leading groups. This summer, she led 200 of her peers at a summer leadership school. She has spoken at 6 major national conferences. Some of you are saying right now, how is she any different than my brother, my sister, my niece, my nephew, or my grandchild, or that neighbor kid who lives next door and does absolutely everything? Svetlana is different because she migrated to the United States as a child when she and her siblings were adopted by a family that volunteers as well. And she had to learn a new language, and she found herself in service. Svetlana has been blind since birth, and she navigated that program, has done all of those things, as well as become an advocate for the blind at the age of 20. It gives me goosebumps to think about it, and I could not be more proud of her. Another person I met would be Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Peacock. I met him a few years ago, and he was 102 years old, and he was still volunteering and serving because of the amazing things that he felt he could do if he worked with youth. It's absolutely incredible. He still wanted to help at 102, and he would entertain cadets by telling them about being a missionary to Persia, which does not exist anymore. My words may not be impactful, but let me share some words that are absolutely impactful. These are the words of someone else, and they're related to our emergency services mission, where we train to look for missing aircraft, missing people, help people after disasters, and to do imagery after disasters to help organizations like FEMA help people faster. These are the words of a widow whose husband we found the crash site of. We weren't able to save this life, but as you can see, she said, "I cannot thank you enough for your time, expertise, and efforts to locate and recover my husband. You make a difference." Those are powerful words. And I've actually met people who volunteer with me who do so because we found a relative's crash site. It's absolutely incredible. Jim Rohn, the entrepreneur, would tell us that service to many puts us in line for greatness. Greatness in reputation, greatness in wealth, greatness in returns, and greatness in satisfaction, and greatness in joy. I will tell you, volunteering has done all of that for me. I've also developed my social skills, practical leadership, and things like public speaking. I will say, as a young cadet, my leaders told me I really needed to work on public speaking. I'm hoping after this, they might upgrade my scores just a little bit. So there are lots of benefits for volunteering. There are health and fitness benefits. You can go from couch to cadet, as I did. You can be as active or inactive as you really want to be when you volunteer. There are mental health benefits to volunteering. Studies have shown that people are happier, have less anxiety, less depression, and can even improve their self-esteem. Abraham Lincoln would tell us that is because when we ease the heartache of others, we forget about our own. It can also have an incredibly positive impact on your career. I will tell you, I would not be an early college leader. I would not have been a community college dean without the great leadership skills that I learned volunteering. It gives you employability, promotability, and organizations understand the impact that volunteering has on the community. That's why many businesses will actually give you time to volunteer. They know how important that community impact piece is. Committed, dedicated groups of citizens coming together can change the world. Margaret Mead told us that, and I think volunteers are those dedicated individuals who come together and make a difference in the world. They make our communities and our world better. As a volunteer, you give time, expertise, and ideas, and you get back confidence, support, and incredible skills. You get a network of lifetime friends. You get motivation and inspiration. Those are priceless things. Going to a volunteer event is like stopping by a motivation or inspiration station and topping off your tank. It gives you a lot of energy. And so now you know why I pay to volunteer. Some of you are passionate about causes. Some of you probably donate to organizations, and you know how good it feels to know that your hard-earned dollars go to help an organization change lives. I would say it feels even better to volunteer and to see people grow before your eyes, to see the people that you lift up with your time, your talent, your efforts. You bring not only the ability to do tasks that organizations need done, but also professional skills that can absolutely make a difference in those organizations. Time, talent, it's needed. You can volunteer as little or as much as you want. Can you be great? You absolutely can. Martin Luther King Jr. told us that everyone can be great. Everybody. Anybody can serve. You don't need a college degree. You don't need to be able to make your subject and verb agree to volunteer. You don't need to know the second law of thermodynamics in physics to volunteer. All you need is a heart full of grace. There are 1.7 million or more nonprofits out there, and they need help. Some are well-known organizations, and some are more obscure. One of those organizations in that diverse portfolio of nonprofits probably aligns with your interests and your passions. So, volunteers are in high demand. The return on your investment of time and talent is really big. That's my call to action for you because of that incredible return on investment. Go out there and change attitudes, save lives, and shape futures, and make our world and our communities a better place. Go out there and volunteer, even if you have to pay to do so. Thank you.
You know, we plan on making these a yearly event, so if anyone would like to volunteer for next year and pay me to do so, be happy to take both your time and your money. So, Regina, who working a practice schedule with her was always interesting because like hurricanes would happen and she's like, oh, I got to be, you know, in Florida or, you know, the Carolinas are directing like these efforts. I can't make this practice. Let's reschedule. I was happy to work around, but you know, hurricane season was always interesting working with someone who runs the people who are doing the emergency rescue. And she's a fantastic leader. Speaking of fantastic leaders, about 30 minutes east of here, Kansas birthed one of this nation's great leaders, that in President Eisenhower. But his leadership is not as well understood by casual observers of history as it is by people who have studied his life and his impact. So I'd like to welcome Katie Pearson from the Eisenhower Institute up here next to talk about Eisenhower and his legacy. Give me just a second, apparently. I thought I got the signal. And I did.
Take a look at this photo. Anyone recognize it? Call it out, you can answer. Okay, there we go. This is one of the most iconic images of the World War II era, possibly the entire 20th century. Here we see General Dwight D. Eisenhower, front and center, surrounded by the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division on June 5th, 1944, the night before Operation Overlord, more commonly known as the D-Day invasion. My colleagues and I at the Eisenhower Foundation are surrounded by this photo every day, including a life-size version, as we walk the halls of the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. Many of you, if not all of you, have seen this photo dozens of times. So often, in fact, that you may not even give it a second thought. If pressed, you might say, oh sure, that's Eisenhower with the troops on D-Day. I've seen this image captioned, General Eisenhower encouraging the troops, General Eisenhower giving the soldiers their orders, and even General Eisenhower advising the troops. The real story behind this photo is actually far more indicative of two of the hallmarks of Eisenhower's leadership, humility and genuine human connection. You see, in this moment, Eisenhower isn't rousing the troops or giving them orders. The soldiers preparing to invade the beaches of Normandy didn't even know that Eisenhower would be with them on the night of June 5th. He just showed up and walked among the crowds of soldiers, looking for someone from his hometown, Abilene, Kansas, a small community about 30 miles east of where we are tonight. And then Eisenhower and the photographer came to this paratrooper wearing the number 23, Lieutenant Wally Strobel. Eisenhower asked Lieutenant Strobel where he was from, and Strobel said Saginaw, Michigan. Eisenhower said something to the effect of, oh, Michigan has great fishing. He asked Lieutenant Strobel if he liked to fish, and the two began talking about their shared love of fly fishing. Eisenhower held up his fist to demonstrate a fly fishing technique. And click, the image was captured forever. Decades later, Lieutenant Strobel shared the story of their conversation with members of the Eisenhower family the curators and archivists at the Presidential Library and Museum, and even the media, and yet this image still remains widely misunderstood. What we're seeing here is just a couple of guys from the Midwest talking about fishing. I love this story about General Eisenhower. And if you find it disappointing, if you were hoping to hear words of eternal wisdom or inspiration, I think you should reconsider. This may seem like just a fun bit of trivia, but it actually beautifully demonstrates characteristics that made Eisenhower a leader people wanted to follow. First, this anecdote shines a light on Eisenhower's humility. At this moment in history, he was the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces, commander of not just the U.S. Army, but all Allied soldiers serving in Europe. He was many, many ranks above the soldiers he mingled with on the evening of June 5th. Yet he didn't consider himself too big, too important, or too busy to have one-on-one conversations with rank-and-file soldiers. In fact, Eisenhower's humility extends even further than what you can see in the photos and videos from that night. What you can't see in that photo is what Eisenhower was carrying in his pocket, a note that has become known as the in case of failure note. In the famous order of the day for Operation Overlord, Eisenhower told the soldiers and the world that we will accept nothing less than full victory on the beaches of Normandy. Privately, however, he knew that success was far from guaranteed. So he wrote these words: "Our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." Eisenhower kept this note in his pocket for several days, just in case he needed to release it. Thankfully, he never did need it, and it was later found in the trash, pulled out, and preserved. Eisenhower's humility was not limited to shaking hands and sharing fly fishing techniques. But there's something else that the fly fishing story demonstrates really nicely. Eisenhower truly valued making genuine connections with people. He consistently prioritized humanity over rank, position, or what he called a bright and shining image. His fishing conversation with Lieutenant Strobel wasn't a one-off or a public relations stunt. Soldiers loved Eisenhower because he visited them and talked with them every chance he got. Edward Babe Heffron, one of the famous Band of Brothers paratroopers, wrote about meeting Eisenhower when the 101st Airborne received the Presidential Unit Citation. In his book, Brothers in Battle, Best of Friends, Heffron wrote, "Nobody liked a division parade. Nobody wants to hear officers talk and don't say nothing. But we were all hepped up because Ike was coming. We didn't mind standing out there, not for the medal, not for the decoration, but for Ike. He was the coolest. All the guys loved him. Ike walked down the line and congratulated some of the guys personally." This willingness, or even eagerness, to connect with people beyond their rank or station was so important to Eisenhower and so effective that it became a cornerstone of his approach to diplomacy once he became president. As the president who founded Camp David and People to People International, he said in 1956, "If we are going to take advantage of the assumption that all people want peace, then the problem is for people to get together and to leap governments. If necessary, to evade governments, to work out not one method, but thousands of methods by which people can gradually learn a little bit more of each other." By the time he said those words, Eisenhower had already seen the vast ripple effects that gradually learning a little bit more of each other could have. He was a leader people wanted to follow. I've lost track of the number of articles I've found about Eisenhower's leadership that all tread the same paths: decisiveness, sticking to a task, adapting to challenges. These are all true of Eisenhower, and I think we would all agree that leaders should develop these traits. However, none of those qualities are what Eisenhower himself valued most in leaders, and I don't believe they're the reason for his enduring popularity. In 1965, he wrote an essay called "What is Leadership?" for Reader's Digest, in which he mentions none of those attributes. Instead, he claims every leader should have enough humility to accept publicly the responsibility for the mistakes of the subordinates he has himself selected, and likewise to give them credit publicly for their triumphs. Sounds familiar, right? And if you're thinking, well, that's nice, but it really doesn't apply to me because I'm not a leader, then you'll find that Eisenhower would disagree with you. In that same essay, he wrote, whether or not they are ever singled out for prominence, anyone who does their work well, who is justifiably self-confident and not unduly disturbed by the jeers of the cynics, who stays true to decent motives and is considerate of others, is, in essence, a leader. May we all live up to this ideal. May we all take the time to talk about fishing. Thank you.
You know, I'm from Texas originally, so learned about it like LBJ. I've been learning more about Eisenhower since I moved here to Kansas a little bit over a year ago. And you know, of all the inspiring quotes that Katie just gave, I think my personal favorite Eisenhower quote is that haters are gonna hate, but I'm just gonna shake it off. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I stand corrected. That was not Eisenhower who said that. That was another great American who is the subject of our next talk, Taylor Swift. And here to talk about the cultural power of Taylor Swift, from the University of Kansas, Dr. Brian Donovan. Thank you.
I've been a sociology professor for over 2 decades, and it will probably surprise no one that my most popular class is called The Sociology of Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift and her fans have dominated the cultural landscape, and they've become one of the most fascinating sociological spectacles in recent memory. I use pseudonyms in my research, and so a woman who I'll call Naomi is a Swiftie. And she's one of about 60 Taylor Swift fans who I've interviewed for my research on the Swiftie fandom. Naomi moved to Colorado to pursue a PhD in robotics. And she was struggling. She felt alone. She didn't have any friends in her city, and there were very few women in her degree program. And then the COVID pandemic hit, which made her feel even more isolated. On her way home from class, Naomi spotted a floor mat in front of her neighbor's apartment unit. The floor mat said, "I hope you like Taylor Swift." Naomi left a note for her neighbor that said that she too was a fan. Maybe they could talk. Their first few conversations were a little awkward, but their friendship deepened over time, and months later, they bought tickets to the Eras Tour together. Naomi still had to navigate a difficult degree program in a new city, but she had a friend, because of a floor mat, because of Taylor Swift. Naomi's story is not unique, but it's different from the way that many media critics and scholars have depicted fans and fandom. Critics have often described intense fan behavior as a parasocial relationship. Parasocial relationships are where a person feels an intense personal connection to a celebrity, but it's one-sided. The celebrity doesn't know them and likely doesn't even know that they exist. Many people see these relationships as a problem, as a symptom of our celebrity-obsessed culture, and as a sign of general societal decline. They argue that this form of hero worship takes away from real relationships that people could be building with real people. Seen in that light, legions of Taylor Swift fans like Naomi should be a cause for concern. But what if parasocial relationships and celebrity hero worship are good things? For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of doing in-depth interviews with Swifties. I've had hundreds of hours of conversations with Swifties, And I've monitored their behavior on online social media platforms like TikTok and Tumblr. And I want to share with you some of the insights that I've gained from those conversations and observations. And in so doing, I'll try to make a case for why we should take Taylor Swift seriously. But more importantly, why we should take her fans seriously. Taylor Swift's talent as a singer, songwriter, and performer is obviously part of her appeal. She's broken several world records over the course of her career, including being the first person to win 4 Grammy Awards for Album of the Year. By several metrics, she is the most successful recording artist of the 21st century. But she has another talent that helps explain her devoted fan base. Taylor Swift creates what I call a parasocial affordance. That is, there are specific things that she does as a songwriter and as a celebrity that build a shared intimacy with her fans. Taylor Swift is known for her intimate and autobiographical songwriting, which encourages the listener to compare their experiences with hers. Now, Taylor Swift is obviously not the only songwriter to do this, but my interviews suggest that she does it exceptionally well, and that she speaks to the experiences of girls and young women in powerful ways. In several interviews, Swifties told me that it's like Taylor Swift is reading their diary. And in turn, her songwriting makes it feel like the listener is reading her diary. Amy, a Swiftie from Boston, said, "I feel like she personally wrote the song, 'You're on Your Own, Kid,' about me. I feel like every line is just like so applicable to my life in scary ways." Wendy, a Swiftie in her mid-20s, said, "Taylor Swift sees me in a way that the people in my immediate social circle maybe don't even see me. Like that is a joyful feeling." Now, many of the Swifties who I interviewed, like Amy and Wendy, freely admit to being deeply invested in her personal life. And they put Swift on a pedestal, and there's an element of hero worship. But their parasocial relationship with Taylor Swift is a resource. That resource connects them with other Swifties. The vertical relationship with Taylor generates productive horizontal relationships with others, at work and out in public. The power of those micro connections is what sociologists refer to as the strength of weak ties. Swifties have created a vibrant collective culture, like the call and response moments during her live performances, the trading of friendship bracelets, and countless inside jokes and bits of lore within the Swiftie fandom. These things have emerged organically within the fandom. For example, Taylor Swift did not command her fans to create and trade friendship bracelets. Rather, fans seized on a single line in the song, and the practice grew from that. When Taylor Swift performs a song called Delicate, fans will scream out a 6-word chant at a particular moment in that song. That chant was created in 2018 by a 17-year-old Swiftie named Emily Valencia, and it's become part of Swiftie culture, and it happens at every single performance of that song. Now, to outsiders, these behaviors might seem simplistic or cult-like, but they're a source of what sociologists call collective effervescence. Today, fewer people than ever are attending church, but many still crave that sense of togetherness and connection. Fandom and these fan rituals provide that sense of connection with other people. And that sense of connection can cut across social and political differences that might otherwise divide us. Dozens of Swifties described to me how they made connections at work or out in public through a shared appreciation of Taylor Swift. And they discussed how easy these connections were to me. A Swiftie named Addison said, "A Taylor Swift song comes on at like a bar or something like that, and you can immediately point out the people in the room who are huge Taylor fans. And you're like immediately friends. We should listen to the lessons that Swifties can teach us because joy and friendship are supremely important, especially with the loneliness epidemic that's gripped our society. Hardcore fans like Swifties can show us the importance of joy and friendship because fandoms, despite their divisions, dramas, and hierarchies, are joy factories, and we need more joy factories in today's world. There's a lot of bad news out there, and the Swiftie fandom, well, not perfect, is a haven. The world that Swifties have created is a source of lasting relationships and social connections. And the fandom has done this not in spite of the parasocial relationships with Taylor Swift, but because of them. And that's why Taylor Swift and her army of Swifties are an important pop culture phenomenon that we should take more seriously. Thank you.
You know, one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs is Bad Blood, although now that I'm in my 40s, when I hear that, it just reminds me to go see my cardiologist. And what that doctor will always tell me is, you know, it's a lot of health depends on what you eat. And up until this next speaker, I never really put much thought into I put thought into what I was eating, but not where that food came from and how far away it traveled. And how far away the speaker is traveling to get here. So our next speaker will be discussing supply chains and how to shorten them for overall health. So please welcome Sabrina Do Rosario.
Good evening. I'm very excited to be here, and I wanted to start by asking you a question. What did you eat today? Can you make a mental picture of what you had for lunch or for one of your meals? This is something I had a while ago in Salina recently, and depending on where you're from, you might make a different mental picture of what a meal looks like. I bet that most of Americans would think about a hamburger and fries as what they had for lunch today. Me, I'm from Brazil, so I would imagine the rice and the beans that you see in this feijoada dish right there. But now back to your meal. Can you travel with the ingredients of what you ate today to their point of origin? Where did your plate start today? I hope that, like me, you arrived in a farm or in a field, maybe with some animals in the background. And then my next question is, how far is that field from this room, from where we are? And I bet you that it's very far. We know that over 90% of the food that we eat here in Kansas is not grown in Kansas. They're grown in other parts of the world. And then to throw another statistics at you, and I promise it's the last one, 80% of chronic diseases could be resolved or improved with a change in diet, according to the National Institute of Health. And so this gives us some food for thought, right? Now, why do we eat what we eat? This is a map that shows if food had nationality, this is where it would be from. And it also shows that there's a bigger diversity of things when they're closer to where they're naturally occurring. And I can give you an example. So as I said, I'm from Brazil. And then at any point in time, you would go in a grocery store there, and you would find all these kinds of bananas ready for you to buy and to purchase. And I'm going to read you some of these variety names. You can get a banana nanica, banana da terra, banana ouro, banana maçã, banana prata. depending on if you're going to cook something, or if you just want for a snack, or which one settles better with your stomach, then you can just buy different things. So imagine my surprise when I moved here in 2020, and I found this at the grocery store. It's a fresh banana, probably wasn't grown very close to where we are, probably was picked while it was green, and it's only one variety, and it's not the one that settles better with my stomach. But even though I'm very far away from where bananas are usually grown, I still want to eat one. And this is one of the things we need to think about. This graph looks like some small kid was coloring or something, but if you look at the different colors around the circle, they mean different regions of the world. And this is what happens when we go to different places. We take our food and our food culture with us. So this is us eating stuff from all over the world. We are globalized eaters. We don't want to eat only what grows here anymore. And we're globalized people. We're always moving from place to place. Now, what do we grow in here? This map shows places that make more money with food that we eat, with human food in green, and places that make more money with animal feed in red. And as you can see, we grow a lot of animal feed, and then probably those are the places where we import the foods that we eat, and also from other countries. The problem with that is that all this food that is grown far away from us, that needs to get on the road. And the farther this food has to travel, it loses its nutrient density, and then it loses its freshness, leaving you all on the road. And also, we have to think about all the hands that participated in getting that food that you ate today. The hands that harvested, the hands that processed, that packaged, that drove or that traveled with that food, that sold and that cooked it for you. Let me give you another example. These are strawberry pickers in California, and they get paid by the box. So if this picture was a video, you were going to see them zooming through that field to make sure that they can fill the biggest amount of boxes that they possibly can. Those people also deserve to be healthy, and that also needs to be taken into consideration. So how do we make sense of all of this? I work at the Community Resilience Hub, which is a department at Kansas Wesleyan University. And what we want to do is have community resilience as the center and have a strategy based on 3 areas of focus, which are education, action, and advocacy. But what does that look like? That looks like in education, the pictures on the left, creating a farmers training program to train the next generation of farmers in regenerative farming practices so that they can grow food closer to us with that idea that the farmer grows for their own community and then the community supports that farmer. Or in action, it looks like the pictures in the middle. That was a mobile farmers market that happened about 2 weeks ago at the Salina Senior Center, where we have an organization that buys food from local farmers and delivers them to places that have difficult access to fresh and healthy foods. It was successful. We want to keep doing that for as long as we can. And it also looks like advocacy. The 2 pictures on the right. There is a group of women on the top right picture that are starting a food policy council here in our county. And then a group of a lot of people of different food policy councils that had an advocacy day at the Capitol. We have to advocate for better policies for farmers, and so that we can start thinking about the food that we eat from the moment the seed gets on the ground. And then we can maybe fulfill our vision statement, which is equitable, prosperous, and collaborative communities. Thank you.
It's getting kind of like dinner time. Has anyone seen my DoorDash driver? I gave them very good directions, but it's been like an hour, and I probably should have tipped. But that's exactly what our next speaker will be talking about. We are being asked to tip in more places and more often. That's leading to tipping fatigue. So our next speaker studies consumer behavior, and we'll be discussing that. Oh, I'm going in the wrong direction. Please welcome Rebecca Adams. No? Well, I got a few extra seconds, trading headsets. If any of you are interested in either volunteering to be part of this next year and help select speakers, or any of you were particularly inspired tonight and think you have an idea we're sharing, please come talk to me afterwards. Email me, call me, etc. Because we'd love to have more people on this team, and we would certainly love to have more great speakers spreading great ideas we're sharing. Excellent.
Good evening. Orders with no tip may take longer to get delivered. Are you sure you want to continue? Were any of you the recipient of this notification from DoorDash last year? Imagine this. You go to your favorite coffee shop and you go get your favorite latte. You go up to pay and bam, you get a screen that asks for a 20 to 30% tip. How does that make you feel? And that may be a common situation that we're familiar with. But for some people, it can be a little bit of a problem. It's a little bit frustrating for people to figure out when should I tip, how much should I tip, or am I tipping in a place that I wasn't expecting? As an instructor of consumer behavior, we are seeing a big shift in consumer sentiment towards suggested tips. And the conversation around DoorDash started to swirl about looking at what is the role of the consumer to subsidize drivers' pay. And we're starting to see headlines like this everywhere, that tipping culture is out of control, tipping backlash is happening. We're seeing Facebook posts and TikTok stitches. So what is it about tipping that has people so confused and so frustrated? Let's start with why people tip in the first place. And 77% of people report that they tip as a reflection of the service that they receive. And COVID was a big turning point for how we started tipping, or how we changed our tipping behaviors. With stay-at-home orders, more people were tipping generously because of that added value of somebody risking their health in order to provide a service. And that led to a culture of over-tipping. And that is really hard to roll back the clock on once we have already entered that culture. And there's kind of 4 big reasons that people are so frustrated or so confused. And the first of those is generally social pressure. Tip jars are something that we used to see on counters all the time, but they could be easily overlooked. And now that's just not the case anymore. Point-of-sale systems make it so much easier to ask for a tip no matter where you are or what business you're in. And businesses have started to push us into these higher tipping amounts. We call that tipflation. And that is frustrating for people trying to balance their own personal budgets. 34% of people report being annoyed by these pre-filled tip screens, and 14% actually report only tipping more. There are some unintended consequences with this. 14% of people report that they will tip more, 25% report that they will tip less. So this is a problem when it comes to trying to get tips and trying to get that generosity out of people. These screens can also feel a little bit deceptive when they offer you a dollar amount instead of a percentage. If mental math is not your strongest suit, like it isn't for me, this can be a little anxiety-inducing at the checkout register to figure out what is the right amount that I should tip. And oftentimes, we don't want to hold up the line behind us to enter a custom amount or take the time to figure out that percentage, so we might just tap on a value. We also have situations like this, where you as the consumer have some sort of rating tied to you. So for instance, Uber, where you do have a rating as a customer. You might feel the pressure to tip a little bit more just to make sure you maintain that good rating. Another is tip creep. And tip creep is this idea, that 3 out of 5 Americans feel like they are tipping in more places today than they were 5 years ago. And that is a big concern for people. Are we tipping at kiosks and self-checkout stations and different apps. What am I tipping at a self-checkout station for? Where is that tip going? And I recently had this situation. I needed some photos edited, and if you've never used Fiverr, Fiverr is a place where you can connect with an independent contractor and negotiate a price for having that work done. And so I needed about 15 minutes worth of editing, and we agreed on $20 for this job. And so we go through, and I get my images, and I leave my review, and then I get this pop-up that is asking for a tip. These are the suggested tip prices on a $20 order. Not only that, it says that it is customary to tip. That's a lot of pressure, and I am also being rated as a seller on that particular site. So what do? A third situation is bill inflation. We know that we're seeing inflation across the board on all things in the economy right now. But we're also seeing an increase in processing fees and service fees being passed on to the customer. So for instance, I pay for an annual grocery subscription service to my house. So I'm paying to have groceries delivered. Does that mean I also have to tip the driver? It turns out that I do. But what am I paying that subscription fee for if I'm also tipping on every order that's delivered to my house? Another example, we went to a restaurant this summer with my family, and we got the bill, and it had that big QR code on the bottom, super convenient to check out. You scan it, pay at the table, but it had a 3% processing fee on it, so we're thinking, all right, that's the convenience of using the app. So the server comes over, we give a credit card and run it as normal, and when she comes back, that fee is still there. It turns out that that fee is the credit card fee that the restaurant used to absorb, and now it's passed on to the consumer. But your menu price didn't come down. So those added fees make that extra discretionary tip feel even more like a burden. This is an interesting example because we know that food delivery apps are particularly complicated with their fees. So this is the exact same order from the same restaurant that I built just minutes apart on 2 separate apps on my phone. And these look wildly different in the way that they present the numbers, but they also calculate my 20% tip differently. One of them is calculating it on the bottom line total, and one is calculating it on the subtotal. So now I need to even find the right delivery app provider to get takeout when that's what I was ordering takeout for in the first place, was that I needed my evening to be easy. And now I need to look at which apps to order that food from. And the last big reason people are so frustrated is just general pricing transparency. We know that there is a tip minimum wage when we go into a restaurant. But what about delivery drivers? How are they compensated? We know that they use their own cars, and we know that sometimes they cover their own insurance. We see that there's a delivery fee on a lot of our apps, but there's a caveat that says that doesn't go to the driver. So where is it going? We know we're paying them, we just don't know what's happening. Even with a tipped wait staff in a restaurant, how are cash tips allocated versus credit card tips? How about that 3% processing fee? It's all very confusing, and we don't know where our money is going as a consumer. And it's really culminating into some unclear rules on tipping. And these are some of the stats that we see out of research, that 72% of people say they are expected to tip in more places. 2 out of 3 Americans say that they don't know if they should tip or how much to tip. And so that is leading to this situation where we know we should tip in a sit-down restaurant, but what about a coffee shop, fast food, food trucks, or even Fiverr? What are we supposed to do? And so people are going to decide if they need to tip on the value or the service itself, the delivery service. Do you tip by the mile? This isn't how consumers think about tipping, but it's how we've had to start thinking about it. So what does the future of tipping look like? It's not likely that businesses are going to stop asking for tips anytime soon. Those point-of-sale systems just make it too easy for them to incorporate. But if they don't address tipping fatigue, people are going to tip less or not at all. They're going to set their own rules on where they will and won't tip, and they're going to choose their own percentage rates. Oftentimes, we had kind of standard expectations on tipping, that 15% was for good service, 20% for excellent service. Now you're going to get a much wider range of what people are comfortable with. And some companies are trying to help. Domino's, for instance, has a You Tip, We Tip campaign, where if you tip $3 or more on an online order, they will give you $3 off of your order the following week. So it helps to lessen the burden on the consumer and also gain customer loyalty at the same time. So it's not just about the numbers. That feeling you're having at checkout, that widespread frustration with tipping, that's absolutely normal. Everybody is feeling that. But what can you do about it? It isn't just about the numbers. It's about showing your appreciation. We have to balance our social expectations with our personal budgets. And so what you can do, take the time to find out the amount that you should tip. It is your money, it is your choice. Take that time, you're not holding up the line, and decide what you're comfortable with. It's like tipping the power back into your own hands. And please remember to tip your presenters. Thank you.
And also tip your host. In lieu of a tip, I will say one of the reasons we asked for your email address, because since you're not paying for this, I'm going to sell your information now. Ted, who is licensed this event, will be sending a survey out to you. I have to submit the email addresses within 48 hours. It's usually pretty quick after I submit them that the survey goes out. Both over the event itself as well as the speakers. Please tell us what you liked and also what we can improve on. And speaking of that, that's a phrase I often use with my students when I'm teaching them public speaking. Our final speaker of the evening was one of my students well over a decade ago, in a very interesting location. I mean, far more interesting than most college classrooms. And I don't mean to say that like Kansas isn't interesting, but I don't want to really spoil the surprise. But it was a place that I had to have a security clearance to go. So, here to talk to you about in our final talk of the night, about the importance and power of language. I'm still going wrong. Please welcome David Maines.
Good evening. Tonight I want to talk to you and share some words with you from one of the great masters of the English language. I'm sure everybody's thinking of the same person. It's going to be George Carlin. George Carlin really was a master of the English language. One time I heard him speak about how we change language and how we create language. And he was talking about when the veterans came back from World War I. They suffered from a condition that nobody had seen before, and they had to come up with a term for it. And the term was shell shock. Like Carlin said, shell shock got your attention. It was almost like the shells exploding that those veterans had to deal with. As things progressed, the language changed. So as we go through more conflicts, we go from shell shock to battle fatigue. Not quite as harsh, a little tamer, easier to palate. And then we finally get to what we have today, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Carlin rightfully pointed out that this is a softening of language. And it doesn't do anything to help the people we're talking about. This softening of language, as Carlin said, if we would have kept the harsh language in the beginning, shell shock, maybe those veterans in Vietnam would have actually received the care they needed when they returned. Now, as a veteran, I took this to heart. And I never realized how much I kept on holding on to that softening of language. Now, don't worry, I'm not here to talk to you about PTSD, mental disorders, or anything drab like that. We're going to talk about something fun, uplifting, and entertaining. We're going to talk about prison. All right? So, my name is David Maines. I own a consulting business. We consult criminal defense attorneys all over the world. I am a National Lawyers Guild trained legal observer. I am a volunteer prison chaplain. I have published on prison-related topics. I am considered an expert on prisons, prison conditions. I have been considered an expert by Texas courts, the Texas legislature, various members of government. I've been solicited by the High Court of England for my expert testimony. And I was an invited speaker at Yale Law School and the United Nations. I've not done much with my life. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth do you become an expert in prisons? Well, it's pretty easy. Go to prison sometime. I was incarcerated. Now, for everybody here, stay in school. Talk to your counselor, maybe a criminal justice degree. There are alternatives. So after incarceration, I became an advocate. I advocated for human rights, prison rights, conditions of confinement, and I really enjoyed advocating for higher education in prisons. HEP. The reason I liked HEP so much is we know that the more education somebody has, the less likely they are to go to prison in the first place. We also know that if they gain education while they're in prison, they're less likely to come back. So I spent a lot of time helping professors, coaches, teachers, instructors all around the world in a group for HEP. It was a great community, a lot of support. And then one day, the language guide was introduced. So out of Berkeley, somebody wrote a guide and decided that we needed to use person-first language when we're dealing with the incarcerated. No more using words like prisoner, incarcerated, inmate, convict. We needed to have person-first language. Their suggestion, actually commandment almost, was that we don't call them prisoners, we call them justice-impacted persons. Did you get that? Justice-impacted persons. So what they're doing is they're trying to do exactly what Carlin was talking about, right? Are we softening the language? That's exactly what they're doing. So this went on for a while, and pretty soon, everything that came up in this group was hijacked. I had somebody in Sweden saying, hey, we have an inmate who has this problem. Immediately, somebody comes back with, have you read the language guide? We really need to use person-first language. And the rest of the entire conversation ignored the issues, and it was all about person-first language. They were policing language. This wasn't just a message board this was happening in. This was all higher education dialogue. So all higher education in prison dialogue was being hijacked. Even prison reform. Well, I could only put up with it so long, and I wrote a very long response and explained how I didn't agree with this person-first language. First of all, I had to point out that justice-impacted person is person last, not person first. Other than that, I had to tell somebody in Berkeley, how dare you, in this day and age, try and tell somebody what personal pronouns they can and cannot use. What they were trying to do, they did it with a good heart. It was well-intentioned. But what they didn't realize is their mistake. What they're doing is trying to stigmatize prisoners. It's not helping people by changing the language. You have stigmatized people who are incarcerated. Person-first language is only used for stigmatized groups. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, pilot. Not stigmatized, are they? They're not person-first either, are they? Didn't think so. Now, would you actually call an instructor or a professor here an education-impacted person? You know, after all, they are people first, right? No, you wouldn't. All you're going to do is reinforce that there is something wrong with being a prisoner. Prisoner, convict, inmate, those are all states of being, right? They're states of being. Excuse me. There have been a lot of other groups that identified this problem. The blind, the deaf, the autistic communities, every one of them stood up to changing and softening the language. Every one of them fought against person-first language. Why? Because blindness isn't something they have. It's a state of being. It's a part of who they are. I'm going to leave you with what I left the people from Berkeley, a little challenge. I said, if you can get the world to stop using the term doctor and professor and call them person who has earned a doctorate, then we can revisit this. Until then, I ask that people stop trying to soften language. Stop policing language. Stop stigmatizing people. Stop stigmatizing groups with person-first language. And start actually putting people first. Thank you.
For those of you who are my students, this is what happens when you pay attention in my class. It's like a commercial. That rousing speech concludes our evening. Thank you so much for spending a good few hours with us. I hope this started some conversations, engaged some ideas. That's the entire TEDx mission, and the TED mission is to promote ideas worth sharing. We'd love to have you back here next year as a volunteer or even as a speaker. If you know somebody in Salina or in Kansas, just in the area, and you think they'd be a great speaker, please send them to us as well. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, either in person or via the live stream, and look forward to seeing you all here next year. Have a good night.